Okay, welcome folks. I'm just starting step 6 of my Keepsake box. So I clamped it together and now I'm going to take my clamps off. Put them away. And now these miters are glued together, but they're not very strong at this point because it's just end grain glued to end grain. So I want to be really careful with the box. The next thing I'm going to do is step 6, which is to put these little slots in the corners. Which will strengthen them and it'll look nice when I do it. So the first thing I need to do is go to my plan and figure out where my miter slots are based on having to use this little jig that's going to hold my box. So there's an 1.5 inches of extra width on this thing. So I need to do some calculations as to where the slots are going to go, and there's a nice little calculation sheet on the plan. So while I calculate those numbers, okay, so those 3 numbers I did are my fence settings. Okay, I'm going to set it up to the very first one. Be careful because this ruler's in 30 seconds. And now I'm going to set up my blade height, which is also on the plan. And I have to account for a little bit of difference with this height of the sled, but that's already included on the plan. So, switch off the saw. There we go, I got my blade height. Turn the saw back on. And now I always want to keep the top to the right side here. And I'm going to do it like so. Once you go through the saw, make sure you take off the box so you don't screw up the nice little slice you just did. I'm going to do all 4 corners just like that. I put a slice in each one of my corners, and now I'm ready for my second fence setting.
And here we have a student doing their second cut into the corner of their miter box. Make sure to remove your box after each corner so you don't double cut the slot and make it too wide. And after doing the 4th corner, we'll reset the fence to the 3rd setting and do our 3rd set of cuts.
Okay, so once I've made the 3 slots into my corners of my box, I want to cut pieces of wood to go into those corners. And I kind of have to start to think ahead now how I want my lid and my handle to kind of match in terms of my mitered keys. So whatever I'm going to do for my knob or my handle and whatever I'm going to do for my glue ups, I kind of need to decide what type of wood I'm going to use and how I want that all to look. Even it might make sense to go do your knob or handle right now so that you can match the keys to that. And eventually we'll glue in some lumber into our lid. In terms of cutting the small little slices to go into the corners, I made this hardwood small parts jig for cuts less than 1/8 of an inch. Now, you want I made this 7 inches, so I'm going to do 7 inches plus the width of the key I want to cut. And then I'll use my push sticks. Okay, I just wanted to put in a little segment. With this hardwood small parts jig, some students were having some issues with the boards kicking back on them once they cut through because it's hard to hold them at the back end. So I think it's best if we use the saw that has the splitter and the anti-kickback. Just when you're cutting the small parts, you probably have to leave the dust guide up. And then same thing, we can cut our small part doing the 7 inches plus the little bit we need. And I'll show you here. And in order for the anti-kickback to work the way it should, we need a piece that's about 12 to 14 inches long so that it reaches there by the time it cuts through the blade. So make sure you got a nice long piece, and we're going to use this saw to do those cuts. That way we'll be extra safe and get our pieces cut extra well. There we go. Now I'm ready to go cut my triangles and file them so they fit perfect, and then glue them in place.
Another method, if you can find a little bit skinnier piece, is to put it on top of a scrap of wood and plane it down. And you're just planing it to be the same thickness as your miter slots, which is pretty delicate in terms of adjusting the thickness of the planer, but you should be able to get there. You can also use the drum sander to sand them down to the appropriate thickness, just taking off a little tiny bit. Until it fits perfectly into your box. Or you can even hand sand them down just slightly until they fit.
Now I'm ready to cut my little triangles. I'm just going to use this little miter box. I want to make them bigger than I need them, and then I can trim them later. In my case, I'm going to do 8 walnut ones and 4 peduncle ones.
If you cut a key and it still doesn't fit into your slot, you can take a file and just lightly file it down until it fits in just perfect. Once you get all your keys cut, you're ready to glue them in, and I just used a little nail to put glue into the slots. And then you want to make sure to push back your little keys until they're all the way to the back of your slot and tight. I don't really worry about glue squeeze out because I'll be able to sand that off later. Just want to get them in nice and tight without breaking them.
And now I'm going to leave this until tomorrow. If I have time, I could start working on my lid, preparing pieces of wood to glue in as stripes and stuff. And then when this is dry tomorrow, I can cut it flush and sand the box down. Once I get all my corners glued in place and I've left them overnight to dry, I'm ready to just trim them off. So I'm just going to cut them not quite flush with the box, but just outside of that line. And then once I've cut them all off, I'm going to take them to the belt sander, and then the sander, and then I will hand sand them. There we go. And now I'm just going to use the belt sander to just touch up these keys. Now the rule of thumb with the belt sander is it's going to screw stuff up twice as fast as it fixes it. So I just want to get rid of the keys from sticking out, but I don't want to mess up my sides or my corners at all. So now I'm ready to go use either the orbital sander or hand sand the outside of my box down. And there we go. I got my box basically assembled. I got my miter keys in. I've got it sanded most of the way. I'll probably spend some more time just sanding it till it's perfect. And I'm ready to start my lid.